Hello and welcome to another episode of the Aravaipa Rides podcast. Today I'm joined by Tim Racette, Executive Director of MBAA. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Tim, we're going to talk a little bit about you and how you got into the sport. Talk a lot about MBAA. I think you've got definitely a lot to say. For those of you folks listening who have never heard, you'll get to hear a lot about this great organization here in Arizona. So we'll just jump right into it. Welcome once again, Tim. Tell me a little bit about you, kind of general background. I know you're not from here originally, so how did you wind up in Arizona, and how'd you get into biking?
Yeah, so I am originally from the Wisconsin area and southern Wisconsin, and came out here for school at ASU.
Okay.
And that's what kind of got me turned on to mountain biking, rode bikes as kids, but
Sure.
my college roommate was really into mountain biking.
Yep.
And so he got me into it, and I just started riding the class, and then did my first race with the ASU cycling team a couple years into school.
Yeah.
And just kind of got hooked from there. I moved back to Wisconsin after college.
Yep.
Lived in Madison for a while.
Okay.
And then after I got married, my wife and I moved back out here, and then I became more involved with the MBAA organization and doing more than just racing.
Gotcha. To back up a sec, the races that you were doing at ASU, that was road or was it mountain?
Actually, cyclocross was the first one I did.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then they did a little, every year they would do a little TT up a mountain.
Sure.
And so we would do those, and Papago had a little short track, which is a lot bigger now.
Right.
So yeah, it was just a club team, ASU cycling and triathlon, but just a great group of folks who like to have fun and ride bikes, and get you excited to get out on the trails.
It's a good organic way to get involved into the sport. Awesome. And you've got a family. Here, and you've got a couple of young ones, I believe?
Just one.
Just one, okay.
Sometimes it feels like more, but yeah, she's 3.
Okay.
And my wife and my daughter, and we've got a dog. So,
okay.
Yep.
So daughter's not riding yet, I assume, 3 years old?
Actually, she is. This summer she started on her pedal bike.
Okay.
These kids, they get the striders.
Sure.
And then they get balancing, and then she had a little trike, and that's kind of how she kind of figured out the pedaling part.
Yep.
And then one day my wife just put her on the pedal bike and pushed her off, and that's it. So, and she even went to the BMX track for the first time 2 weeks ago. So
how'd that go
cool.
for her?
Yeah, she did.
She liked
did
it?
good. By the at first it was like, she's probably not gonna be riding this stuff tonight, but then by the end of the night, she was
surprised you.
Yeah, riding it. So
very cool.
Yeah.
Does your wife ride at all?
She does. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we met riding
Okay.
so in Wisconsin there was the Wars Series, Wisconsin off-road
Gotcha.
mountain bike scene. So we met just at one of the races there.
Very nice.
And then when we moved out here, we'd raced quite a bit in the Midwest and kind of around the country, and so just kind of kept it rolling when we got down here.
Very cool. Does she still race? Is she still involved?
Yeah. Not as much. She's been the last 3 or 4 years. She's kind of switched over to single speed. So in some regards, that's harder than gears.
For sure.
In a lot of regards. So yeah, she's pretty tough.
Gotcha. Very cool. All right. So you're the executive director for MBAA. Mm-hmm. How long have you been involved with them?
So I joined the board in, I think, 2014.
Okay.
And Mike Melly was the head of the organization at that time.
Gotcha.
And I mean, the organization's been around since, I think, 90 or 89. So
quite a history.
Me stepping in and just kind of carrying on the legacy.
Okay.
And so Melly was in charge at the time, and I joined on the board. And then Mike ended up moving to Colorado to go work for Lifetime, and kind of encouraged me to take over. And so with the director role, it's a lot of behind the scenes.
Right.
So it was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I'd still like to, race and put an emphasis on racing.
Sure.
So it was a really good fit because, you can only compete at a super high level for so long, and then you want to be, it's nice to be able to have some kind of transition where you're still involved.
Right.
And to be able to, be involved very early on was great.
That's awesome. I know you've got a decent sized board. It's a pretty big organization, so a lot of different people doing different things. Do you find that you're always looking though for new people to join?
Yeah, volunteers and board members or just people who want to be involved outside of the races is always a need.
Yep.
We have a 5-person board and race director and staff and some contractors and timing and things like that.
Sure.
But it definitely takes a lot to make it all come together. I'm kind of the behind the scenes guy and kind of the face of the Enduro series.
Right.
But we've got a lot of good people who really help make it happen.
Nice. Very nice. You mentioned the history just a little bit earlier. And I think we had an email conversation several months ago. It was more of a question and answer than a conversation. But I've got a good friend of mine who used to live out here, also went to ASU, rode a lot of the races back in the 90s as well. And in fact was in 1999, the Clydesdale class state champion.
Cool.
And I want to say in 98, he was runner up. 99, he was the champion. Still has the shirt, is proud of that. I think he's shown me a picture of it a couple of times because he knows my involvement in the sport too. But going back, none of that is actually on the website. Was that just omitted just because it's so old? It's kind of not stuff. I just love to see this is obviously a personal request than anything else, but to be able to see Jim's name out there on 99, I think a lot of the stuff is still in the 2000s. Is the website kind of newer for you guys?
Yeah, a lot of those timing and results were all on paper.
Right?
And I remember going through, a couple storage units ago.
Oh no.
And we found some photos and some old stuff and some old race directories and things. And it probably could reach out to some of the early, MBAA staff, and maybe we can pull up some old results and things. But it really wasn't until maybe in the mid 2000s or so that we started doing more electronic timing and online results and all that stuff. So
yeah, no, and I kind of figured that it was. I was just surprised knowing that there was history. The first time I went back and looked, results are only a certain number of years back and whatnot. And granted, you look at anybody who has a race in any sport really that at this point that isn't or an event that isn't football. NFL can afford to do anything they want going back they want to, but us smaller guys have a little bit more. It's a lot more dedication and time to keep building pages. Right?
Even some of the courses and places that we used to hold races, they either don't exist or in the early 90s there was also the Cactus Cup that took place on the Westworld side of the McDowells, and those trails aren't there in the same fashion anymore. So
it's kind of different, right? The results from those years would be kind of different from a champion from others. That makes total sense. But it's great that you have this history. I know there's not a whole lot of other organizations, at least in the state that I'm aware of, with 20 plus years of experience putting on races, putting on events. So it's pretty cool that there's a organization like yours out there right now that people can talk about for at this point generations. Dads and sons and maybe even grandfathers could have been involved, say from 90 to today. So pretty neat thing to have under your hat there.
Yeah, and you think of how new this Arizona, the state, and Phoenix area is, relative to the East Coast, where buildings are multiple hundreds of years old, and we're talking maybe 50 or 60 for certain areas of town. So, but the organization's main purpose is to raise money through the races and the merchandise and all that stuff that we offer to be able to improve the trails. And to give out money so that a city or a organization that needs funding to get tools or build or put in rollover gates and all that kind of stuff, so that they can do that, and then everyone's experience riding or hiking or doing lots of different things on the trails is better.
Yeah. I don't know how much you guys advertise it or to put it out there, but you guys are a nonprofit, right? So everything goes outside of, maybe buying new tools for trail restoration. Everything does go to different other groups.
After we cover our costs and have a little money for a rainy day, then it gets given out typically this time of year, the fall, each year, we open up our grant process, and then people can write in, and it's really cool to see, certain areas, Hawes Trail System, Cave Creek, just areas that have really, really taken, done a lot with a little at first, and then now it kind of have exploded into these amazing, outdoor recreation trail systems. So, and we've got great county parks, and city parks, with South Mountain and Phoenix Mountain Preserve and whatnot. But so there really are a lot of good groups working together. Different levels of land managers and things, county, city, and then local organizations, which is kind of unique, because some areas that's a pretty big challenge.
Definitely. I've heard of plenty of areas where there's a lot of toe stepping, and if you are a nonprofit group, who wants to come in at let's just say like a West Valley Trail Alliance type of group, your whole dedication is purely to a geographical area of improving trails. There are times when the city, state, county government in that area doesn't want that at all. They say, these are ours, we're going to take care of it, and if you want a trail taken, fixed up, you can submit a process or, that kind of thing, and we'll review it at a meeting, and then we'll see if we are going to allocate any funds. And it's great to have government organizations that will work with these nonprofits like Hawes Trail or West Valley, to say, oh, you've got the money, and you've got by all means, we know that you're not just coming in and throwing dirt around and making a mess of things. You guys are actually going to make improvements for everybody, for everybody.
And even
around.
Developers building new, as you mentioned, West Valley, building new developments and houses. They've kind of embraced some of the trails that are not necessarily official trails, and kind of worked their developments around them, and then those trails some of them have been adopted in and then maintained, and it's a benefit for new homeowners.
Yep, exactly. Definitely a good place for us to be, riding bikes and whatever outdoor interest you have. Let's talk about races a little bit. So we're kind of in the middle of, or at least we're into your Enduro Fall series. Three race series. Sunrise was number one, so you had that about a month-ish ago. 3 weeks.
A couple weeks ago.
Okay. How'd that go?
That was great. The last couple of years were actually a little wet and even a little snowy.
Right.
So we lucked out this year, and it was a really good turnout. And that's another great example of, so Sunrise is the ski resort, the other ski resort other than Flag, Snow Bowl. And, they've had a lot of struggles, also tribal run. And for a while there was, there was nothing going on in the summer.
Right.
And if you wanted to, ride the trails, you could go out and dig and clean them up, and then you could ride them. So, what they've done in the last couple of years especially has been great, to see the progress, and then actually getting kind of more investment and backing behind, we want trails and we want riders, and that sort of thing has been great to see. And then it helps us because we can hold the races there and have another place for people to ride.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of what you were saying earlier about how a community of, whether it's a town, municipality, community, or a different community in the sense of the resort, realizes that, bringing this group of people in, we're going to spend money, we're going to, go to a restaurant because we're hungry after riding for 2 or 3 hours, probably stay at a hotel because not all of us live that close to Sunrise where it's an easy 1 day up, 1 day back.
But then you're too tired to cause any trouble at the end of the night, so you just go to sleep.
We're not rabble-rousing in the streets at night either. It's just, something when, they realize there's a little bit more potential in the space that they had. It's not just for skiing and snowboarding in the winter. What can we do with the land during the summer? There's this whole other group of people that would love to use it, and if it was usable, they'd come out in droves, more than trickling through. So.
And a lot of people who ride bikes are also into skiing and snowshoeing and snowboarding and all that stuff. So, lots of crossover.
Exactly. Cool. So the Sunrise, and you've got 2 more coming up. Mingus by Prescott.
Yep. Yeah, Mingus and then
the
Hawes.
Newest one is Hawes that started a couple years ago.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, that's been a big hit. It's nice and close for a lot of folks who live in the valley.
For sure.
So that's been fun.
Quite a gem in our little locale here.
Yep.
How's the turnout? Not the turnout, but how's the feedback, I guess, on Hawes now that it's been a couple of years?
Really good. Yeah, that's probably probably our biggest attendance as far as enduro race goes.
Yeah.
And there's even same thing there. There's been some great new trails that have been built, and sometimes it's amazing the types of trails that can be built in some jurisdictions, and then other areas, their Forest Service or BLM or land manager, might want a different type of trail. So, the stuff that's at Hawes is legit.
That's for sure.
Yeah, there's some really hard stuff there. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Before you added Hawes, just having the two, was it, you have to remind me because it's been a couple of years, but did you just call it a series, or was it still a series?
Well, we tried a few different areas. We've gone, we've held a race in Tucson.
Okay.
And we kind of do every other year, every couple years, because we're kind of limited by what trails we're permitted to hold an event on.
Of course.
Let's see, we did a race in Prescott, a couple of races in Prescott.
Okay.
We've been trying to get a race in Flag for a while, and there's some challenges between the window that we have to hold the event and then the trails that we're allowed to use, either because of owls or past fires and things like that.
Sure.
So that's kind of been a bummer because there's a lot of great trails in Flag.
Absolutely.
They're just not all official.
Right.
So it's fun to go out and ride there, but as far as a permanent event, sometimes those are some of the challenges that we run into. But we're always open to trying to find new venues and locations and things like that.
Right.
So.
I definitely echo your sentiments of Flagstaff. Nothing against Flagstaff, but it is a little bit harder to get up in there and to find. You said proper permitting. Because there is so much out there that isn't necessarily is a social trail, and like you said, it rides great on Saturday, and then you put a loop together or an enduro course, and you submit it to the city or the county wherever, and they're like, no, this can't do that one, can't do that one, can't do that one because those are not, you only have these. Oh, okay. Now we got to go back to the drawing board.
Even here, like South Mountain, great trails, but there's just too many day users to for them to say, yeah, you go ahead and hold a race. So,
have you tried permitting there?
Oh yeah, every year I ask them.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they've got a road race, and that's kind of their grandfathered bike race.
Up to the
top. They keep.
Yeah.
But no mountain bike events. So that's kind of, every year people ask, oh, can we do a race on Somo? And it's like, it'd be fun, but until they change their mind, which, it's,
sure.
There are lots. I mean, same with McDowell's or Brown's Ranch or any of these trail systems. They get so much day use, it's hard to close them down and say you can't be on them just for, for the bike race. So, Yep.
I'd always assumed, because I had never tried with South Mountain, but have the same idea that it would be a great place to hold a race. My assumption, because it's considered, or the official title is a preserve, that maybe that was reason why no one else had done it. No one else was holding races. So I've actually never made the attempt on my end as a director to start a race there. But I definitely get it because I ride and run there quite a bit. It's packed. Yeah, and it would be really, really difficult. If you didn't get it closed off, it would not be a fun race.
We even came up with a great layout where the venue could be out way on the west side at the casino and use the west trails where there's not as many people. But that's just part of it. Finding a fun trail system that is near some kind of parking venue accessible location is definitely the challenge. And Tucson is also a challenge. There's lots of great trail systems, but just not enough parking for that we would need. And some of the other organizations run into that too. The high school series is just as big, if not bigger, than the MBAA. And so finding new venues is always probably the biggest challenge.
It is. So you'd be definitely up to growing the enduro series to 4 or 5 like you have. Well, you have 6, I guess, with the spring. If you had the.
We probably could. It's a little tricky because if you go too early, into August, typically you'd have monsoons. Not so much this year, but in most of the places we're racing are up north. So. You kind of have this window, September, October, November, and then as you get into December, people have holiday stuff, and then you're also planning the winter, spring cross country series at the same time. So one a month is kind of a nice I guess, schedule, if you will. And
Sure.
a lot of people, at least in the Phoenix and Tucson areas, pop out to other events over the summer to Colorado or Utah or things like that.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of events going on.
Yeah, there's
the last couple of years. Man, you could find a race, whether it's a bike race or a running race, and probably 2 or 3 every weekend.
Yeah. Yep. It's definitely getting more popular, not popular, but populated with actual events, with scheduled events around here. But let's talk about spring for a second, since you kind of mentioned it. So you've got the spring, winter cross-country series. That's 6 races. I misspoke earlier.
Yeah, we do 6 races, and then we've added the state championship into that. Yep.
Very cool. And has that always been talk kind of the progression? I've always known, as long as I've known you and been in the state in the sport, I think you've always had the 6. It hasn't grown recently the way Haas was added to the enduro.
Yeah.
Has it been the 5 plus?
We've kind of hovered, between maybe 6 and 8.
Okay.
There have been a couple of different venues, in the last 4 or so years. We've again grown to the size where it's been harder to utilize some of the smaller venues.
Right.
So for the state championship race, that's typically a smaller turnout.
Right.
So we've been able to go to some really fun trail systems that wouldn't have the capacity for a series race.
Yep.
And we try to mix up the courses too a little bit, as much as we can, and try some different things.
Sure.
A couple of the races per season. So, and sometimes you think, okay, well I've raced like out at McDowell. Those trails were built in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And Sport Tech long loops, and it's like, I've been racing on these trails for 15 years, 20 years. But to a newer rider who maybe just started racing a couple years ago in the beginner category, and then they work their way up, it is new and different. So yeah, we try to mix it up, but we also don't necessarily want to change up a good thing too much.
Sure.
So.
Yep, I hear you. And that's Prescott, right? State championships, Prescott.
Yep, that's where we did.
I can't remember the name.
Emmanuel Pines. Yep. Yeah, and that's awesome venue.
Yeah, it is.
Right by the trails. So that's been a lot of fun. It's definitely the people who've come to that race. That's been their favorite race. So.
Yep. Between the two, what's your favorite to put on, the enduro or the cross country series?
The enduro is a lot more prep, a lot more work, because not all of these trails are getting ridden that much, or we've just come off of monsoon season, and then the rains could have done lots of damage. So there's definitely more time on the front end doing trail work, getting them ready.
Yep.
And then they're typically bigger routes, so more course marking and things like that.
Sure.
But it's fun to, the enduro riders are a little bit more relaxed than the cross-country crowd.
Yep.
And it's a completely different set of riders, which is nice.
Yep.
So I like them both. They're kind of nice to have them separate. If we did like a cross-country Saturday and an enduro Sunday, that would get to be
a little chaotic.
Get to be a lot. Yep.
Yep. You said new riders, so do you find that you're bringing in actually new people, or are you finding that it's a lot of your cross-country riders who have moved over to enduro, maybe had raced with you in spring for several years, but are now maybe focusing more on enduro and are just, you've got the enduro, we're going to stay with MBAA?
Yeah, we've had some people come over, but it's a lot of new people who would never even consider doing a cross-country race.
Okay.
And some people had done a little downhill back in the day, or
sure.
They're just more into trail riding.
Okay.
And so to have a local enduro race where they can get a little competitive is super fun.
Yep.
And it's pretty laid back.
Yep.
So, yeah, totally different group of riders. Probably 90% of the riders are totally different than the XC riders. So maybe 10% would overlap.
Sure.
And even in the XC side of things, since the high schools have adopted mountain biking as a sport, in the NICA series and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Here we've got the ACA in the fall, which is the high school league, and then MBAA in the spring, and then a new NICA series in the spring as well.
Yep.
So you see not just the kids coming in to the MBAA series, but then like mom and dad. So over the last 5 years, the junior categories have seen a bump, but we've also seen like the intermediate men and women categories, which would be mom and dad racing as well. So that's been fun.
Nice.
And it's nice that it's so, there's a lot of people like to camp and kind of see their friends that maybe they don't live in the same town, but they come to the races and they camp, and it's really fun.
Yep. Yeah, I think one of the coolest things I've seen speaking of the youth, the youth cyclers, in other sports and say your traditional, basketballs and baseballs and whatnot, high school sports, there's definitely more of the competition rivalry, school versus school, and there's like the West Side school versus East Side school, and then that Sunday's game or Friday's game, high school's Friday night, is always the big one. We're going up against West Side High, let's have we're gonna have the rally or whatnot. But in mountain biking, I don't see that. I mean, there's competition, and you see that when they're on the course. When you see them when they're like rolling around behind in the vendor village or whatnot, they're like high-fiving and hugging each other. And if they know you from the West Side High or something like that, they're like, oh Tim, I haven't seen you since the last race or whatever. Catch me up on what you're doing, because they're too far away to actually like hang out and be best buddies. But there's definitely more of like the competitive friendship. I think on the mountain biking kids, which I think is a really cool thing to see. Because again, they'll compete. They're gonna, if I beat you today, I'm gonna beat you today, and I'm not gonna just let you go by because you're, right there. We're going head and head at the end. But at the end, we're gonna high five and give a hug and go grab a Coke at the at the tent and hang out for a bit too.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice the way that the high school scene has developed to where it's not so focused on the results and just the competition side.
Right.
The practices and things like that are just as fun and important as the races.
Yep.
And these kids can have just a different outlet if they're not into ball sports or music or something else. They're it's an individual thing to be riding, but they're still getting to do it together.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Quentin on, race director for NICA, recently, and we were talking about some of that stuff. Not only do they have like the practices and obviously races, but they will have just kind of get-togethers. More of a social ride or a thing for the whole family to get in if they have younger siblings or moms and dads to ride too. Almost like a team bonding, team building, but not just the team, the whole family and all the families that are involved too. So a community, I guess you could say, like really kind of build it, community building. Yep. It's pretty cool to see stuff like that, because again, in some of the traditional sports, you don't really see that as like, let's bring mom and dad out to the field too, and they can hit a few balls over the fence or whatever. It's pretty cool thing to see. You like to race. I know you race almost all of the cross country events. I know I've seen you get out there. Do you race the enduro events too that you hold?
No, that's a little. I do typically course sweep for the enduros because there's a lot more staff and timing that goes on with the different stages for enduro.
Sure.
So then I just try to be the last person around, and then I can send our staff teams back to the base and clean up and that kind of thing. But I haven't done as many of the cross country MBAA races the last year. Okay. Well, since COVID, things were a little bit more challenging, so I didn't do didn't do all those races that year. But I usually try to jump in. We've got race director and such good staff. Yeah. They make it easy on race day, and I can go out and race and then be around if they need anything. But
gotcha.
To have a good timing crew and race director and staff and other people really makes your job easy. It smooth. Yep.
Is it more of a race day decision to get in when you realize, okay, everything's under control, I can go do this, or do you know ahead of time, like I want to race?
Usually the last few years, I haven't been racing the first one, and then I'll do the rest of them just because the first one's a little crazy because it's the
getting
the
back
first
into
one.
it. Yeah.
Yep. But I'd like to, and it's fun. I've mixed it up going between the marathon and the shorter men's open cross country race.
Yeah, I was going to ask if there was a particular division that you jumped into.
I kind of like doing the marathon because you can just kind of it's long enough where you can kind of ease into it.
Right.
Whereas the cross country, I mean, it's all cross country, but the shorter race, it's cool that we get so many, pros coming out to train and things in the winter.
Sure.
And sometimes we'll have, a bigger team that comes out and does a race. And so we've had some really, really big men's pro and open fields. And, it's a little bit harder to just jump in and race those when you're running around all morning and whatnot. Right. But it's fun, and it's cool to see these kids be able to, work on skills and things like that in these local races, and then a grassroots race, and then go to Pro XCT or a bigger event, and then see them do really well.
Yeah. I was going to ask too. So, are you racing legit? Like, are you taking a place if you hit a podium? Are you taking the podium, or are you just getting out there to be competitive and kind of have fun, but get out there and race?
Well, I'm getting older, but I still got to show these young kids that us older guys can still throw down. So yeah, I mean, there was a while where I was faster than I am now, but I'm still quick enough.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's one thing that I have not been able to do yet is race one of my own. I still say I'm going to jump into one of them, probably one of the shorter distances. That way I can just be back, and can take control, I guess, of the event as a whole. But one of these days, I think I might just have to jump in and see where I'm like with the crowd that comes out to my own my races too. You've got a bigger staff, so you've got that little bit more luxury.
Yeah, and it's certainly nice going to other events and just being the observer or being the participant.
Yep.
And obviously, I'm always thinking in the race organizer mindset. Oh, they did that. That's a cool idea. Or, we should try that.
Always taking some notes. Yeah.
But it is nice knowing that there's other stressors going on behind the scenes that I don't have to worry about today. I can just be a participant.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, for sure. What are your favorite races that aren't yours? What have you raced around here, or even outside the state?
I really like the Epic Ride series, the longer races that Todd and his crew puts on.
Yep.
There's a race in the Black Hills called the Dakota 5-0.
Okay.
That'd be my favorite race.
Gotcha.
More like a 40 or 50 miler, single track races.
Yeah.
That's kind of
that's your
up
thing.
my alley. Yeah.
Okay. So you said Epic. Are you doing White Mountains? Tour White Mountains?
I'm not this year.
Weeks? Okay.
I actually, when my wife and I first moved out to Arizona. We lived up in Pine Top.
Oh, cool.
And I did it then.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit tricky when you're putting on events and having a race season to kind of get away from the racing. Summer is kind of that because we don't have a whole lot going on event-wise. I'm just doing behind-the-scenes stuff and permitting and that kind of stuff, computer boring stuff.
Right.
But to kind of be at the races now and then at the races in the spring and then racing, it's like to have that downtime or that off season looks a lot different than it used to.
Yeah.
So, I kind of pick and choose.
Gotcha.
And in Arizona, you could go from August to May and then probably find a couple other things in June and July.
Yep.
So you got to have a break in there if you want to do it for a long period of time.
Yep. No, and we kind of filled that gap with some of the night races, the Insomniac series.
Yeah.
Which is another. It's a great opportunity to get out and race at the best time of day for us in the middle of July and August.
Yeah, and it's cool to see what you guys have done and kind of brought in, brought more runners into cycling too, and then just having cool different events, and different courses and the night series and that kind of stuff has been fun because there's a lot to pick and choose from, and in some ways it's fun going back to some of the same races. A lot of places mix up the course every year, which some like, some don't. It's kind of nice to be able to compare how you did from a year or two ago, but going to the same place and mixing up the course is fun. And just having a little bit different format is also fun. Yeah,
I agree. And I agree, like you said just a minute ago too, about there's so many different things to choose from. Nowadays, there's Epic Zia's got a couple rides here as
Yep.
well.
Yeah,
As you guys,
series.
obviously the two NICA and ACA series out there too. So obviously those are age limited, but everything else is open to everybody.
And something that's a little limited here in Arizona, where if you were in the Midwest or back east and you have this thing called winter, you have other sports and things that you're kind of forced into.
Right.
And so, in Wisconsin, you'd ski in the winter, cross country ski,
yep.
and which is super fun and good workout.
Yep.
And then you get your bike out in March and then start riding, and you'd be excited to ride.
Right.
Instead of you wouldn't necessarily sit on the trainer all winter and just ride.
Right.
So you're kind of forced into some of that seasonality, and then that kind of keeps the longevity going and the excitement to be skiing and to be riding and whatnot, or other things. So yeah, with Arizona being a little more limited in just sunshine and not a lot of snow, at least down here.
Yep.
Burnout is definitely a real thing. So
right, absolutely. You need to kind of force yourself to either jump off the bike and do something different, or just be disciplined enough to kind of mix it up so you don't get one or the other. There's so many different things you can do here. Obviously, people there's kayakers out on the rivers and stuff like that too. I'm sure with everybody, there's that potential for, gosh, do I have to get the kayak out again, or am I lacing up the running shoes again? Or
whether it's in your sport or business, or even school. You think about you got Christmas break, you got summer break.
Yeah,
it's like knowing that there's a break coming to the end of your season. To you're doing a retreat at work and you're going to have a week off work. Like those kind of things really help kind of rejuvenate the mind and get you refreshed, and then you can dive back in and actually be excited, and not get burnt out.
Keeps the fun alive. So I asked Quentin this too when I had him over here, and we're kind of in a similar vein right now. Arizona seems to have this spot in the mountain biking world where we're really well known in some sense. I mean, there's Sedona, kind of, could be considered a mountain biking mecca. I think if you pulled enough people outside the state, but then we're not quite that mecca. Where do you think Arizona falls kind of in the mountain biking destinations of the U.S.?
I would say in January, February, March, it's probably number one.
Okay.
I mean, whether you're a road cyclist and you're want to go ride Mount Lemmon, whether you want to ride in Sedona, or you're just you're coming out for a conference or something to the Phoenix area, and there's hey, I can be riding my bike in February. It's definitely a great spot, and even a lot of people know Flagstaff, and both from a running and cycling perspective. I mean, that's one of the best training places you could live, and lots of great riding. So yeah, I think Arizona is a great spot. There's definitely a lot more areas that have become more known and developed.
Sure.
As of late, I mean, do you take certain areas back in the Midwest that you wouldn't really think much of? Hayward, Wisconsin being one of them. They just had the Shawamigan race there, and I mean, they're not quite the same mountains like you would have out west, but super fun riding and great events and great people that really make it a lot of fun. So, and then in like our county parks are so nice as far as just overall experience if you're going to just go camp there. And there's some plans in the works to revamp some of the parks, McDowell specifically too,
and some big stuff going on
and
down
make
there.
more bike-oriented things there. Where they got the pump track, they got trails and whatnot. So places like Bentonville that have huge investments coming in from Walton family, and then you see this super fast trajectory of trails go in, and then people moving there, and all of a sudden it seems like, wow, in the last 5 years they've exploded, and it has. And a lot more is kind of out there public. It's the hidden spots are not as hidden anymore. Everybody knows about Moab and Sedona. Whereas there's lots of other cool places like that are becoming found.
I became aware of Bentonville, I think, as most people here with Epic, because there's
Yep.
Oz. I think Oz, there are Oz races there, if I have the name correct. And I knew only of Bentonville with Walmart and the Walton family, just from past lives and different work that I do. And so again, mountain biking Mecca was not on my radar. I'm like, why did they bring a race there? And then the more I looked into it and saw how many trails had gone in, what the plans were for growth, and then I started hearing, little bits, whispers, in the hallway kind of thing of like, a friend of a friend was riding in Northwest Arkansas, and there's, a bazillion miles of trails linked up through all these different communities. And, so you start looking again at, and all of a sudden the trail map is this much bigger and then this much bigger. And, they put in all this stuff. I've never been out myself, so I haven't seen it in person yet. I don't know what it's like, but I can only imagine with everyone going there. I don't want to say I'm following the pack, but it obviously must be good. I mean, they probably did a good job, so it's definitely something that's piqued my interest. But again, 5 years ago, I would have said Arkansas. Why are you going? Who's going out there?
And that's one of the cool things about the races also, or I guess a byproduct.
Yeah.
We go hold a race at Sunrise, and someone who never rode there now discovers it.
Right.
We had a race in Kingman years ago,
Okay.
and we've had people who came to the race. They're like, "Oh, I never knew this was here," and I traveled to Vegas for work all the time. Now I got a place to stop and ride.
Yeah.
And so some of those undiscovered places are, it can help the community build more outdoor enthusiasm.
Yeah. I didn't know you did one in Kingman. Which mountain?
That was an enduro. We did the Coyote Pass trailhead.
Okay.
And we rode on both sides of the road there.
Very cool.
So yeah, and place like that, they've had a lot of IMBA involvement and trail building, and then they've got the Wallapai there, the big mountain.
Yep.
And there's some really cool stuff up top, and they're have plans to develop it more, and it's just getting funding and crews and things like that to make some of that happen. But there's places that you wouldn't think about.
Yep.
All over the place.
Yeah. Is that where you've got the Havasu, the Lake Havasu race now for the cross country? Did that come out of having the Kingman race, or vice versa? Were you already racing at Havasu and you discovered the Kingman downhills?
We had a fella who came out to one of our other enduros, and was involved in the trail crew there, and said, "Oh, you should come check out Kingman." And then, I go out there, we ride, we check it out, and then kind of put together a course from there.
Very cool.
Yep.
Very cool. I have to get back for a second too, because there was a follow up to that question about the state, the kind of where Arizona sits, right? The whole thing. So, in your opinion, personal opinion, is it a good thing or a bad thing that we're maybe not tops on the list of your opinion? You said that you think we're in a good spot. People do come to us, which I agree with, that we're not completely unknown. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that we're maybe known but not like the top? We're not Moab. We're not like one of those top spots.
Well, I guess it depends who you are and where you live. I mean, if you grew up in Sedona, just like if you grew up in Moab, and now 20 years later, you're like, wow, there are a lot of people here.
Yeah.
And not everybody respects the trails, and
right.
takes trash out and that kind of thing.
Sure.
So there's definitely some drawbacks to having more people.
Yep.
In some ways, luckily, we've got the heat here that keeps everyone from moving to a place like Tucson.
Yep.
But it's good for the economies.
Sure.
And obviously it's good for the cycling community and cycling economy.
Yep.
But hospitals, restaurants, all that stuff is kind of a byproduct. People have moved. So many people have moved to Prescott.
Yeah.
Because of the Whiskey Off-Road.
Yep.
And they did the race, and then 5-10 years later they'd say, oh, you know what, we're changing careers, let's look at moving to Prescott.
Yep.
So lots of good community building through events.
Yep.
And I'd say overall it's a good thing that Arizona is known, because it draws people here.
Sure.
It's it's definitely very different than the East Coast and roots and wet and that kind of stuff you don't get here. Cyclocross is a lot different here than it would be in the Northeast or even the Northwest. So every place has kind of a unique aspect to it.
It's good. It's a good way to put it all, because I think it is. You want people to come in, and we've talked about it already today. You want to build that community. You want to stimulate the economy. You want people to see see your community, right? People come in from, even if it's just border states here versus coming all the way from the Pacific Northwest. You want them to come in and see experience what it is here that's different than at any of those places. There's always the overcrowding thing. Sedona kind of has that right now, where there's a lot of people up there, a lot of people using the trails. Moab and some of the other places too. You'll always hear complaints. You'll probably hear complaints about South Mountain and Hawes too, right? There's always going to be someone who's going to say, it's too many people out here, unless it's a rainy monsoon morning and only a few people braved it. So there's kind of the good and the bad, but I think in general too, I agree. It's like, you want people to come out and see. You want them to experience what Arizona has that other states, other areas isn't going to have. And it's usually good all around.
Funny story about that is so when we first moved here, we lived up in Pine Top, and it's 7,000 feet. It's like Flagstaff. You got pine trees and there's snow. And we had some friends come out from Wisconsin, and it was February, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna come out and hang out and ride." And we're like, "Yeah, it's not all cactuses up here." And they came out, and then one day it was cold and snowy, and our one friend had a brand new bike, and we did this ride, and it was just caked in mud. Very first ride. It's like, well, we told you guys, it's not. Arizona is a little more diverse than just desert.
It's quite right. There's this state. I don't know if there's a lot of other states that could really show the diversity of ecology that Arizona does, because everyone thinks of the saguaros and the brown, kind of brownish tone, color palette. Tall, jagged mountains and really dry air. And then you go to Flagstaff and you almost have a mix of that a little bit, where it's still, pretty dry, but obviously greener. But then you go east, and the White Mountains are completely different, Pine Top. And
that is such an amazing area. You could take a picture there and post it online, and people would, you're in Montana or something.
Exactly.
I love that area. And it's also interesting, like, we were at Sunrise for the race, and the top is just about 11,000 feet, just under. And then, you ride there in the morning, and then I came home Sunday evening, and it's like, now here I'm down at 1,500 feet. There's not many places you can do that in about 3 hours either.
True.
That's a pretty big spread in elevation.
Yeah. This time of year, you don't see the physical change, but you're talking about, your friends coming out in the winter. And a February drive from one to the other would be a completely different, like entering an entirely different world. On the right day, on a cold, snowy day. Coming down to here, 4 or 5 hour drive, I think it is. And then, it could be 70, sunny, and whatnot when you get to the valley, and then 20 or less.
From a training perspective, it is absolutely perfect to live in like either a Flag or a Pine Top, and then be able to drop down and train at 3,000 feet, and then go back up, and then come down here on the weekends and do group rides. It's pretty awesome.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
I do miss the colors, like the leaves in the fall.
Of course.
Being in the Phoenix area, but
and growing up where you did, I grew up in the Northeast too, so I experienced that every year. The cool, crisp fall and the colors changing.
Yeah, definitely miss that.
You don't really see it, but again, I agree that in this area, if we want it, we can go. It's just 2 hours away. We don't have to go as far as Pine Top even to get the color change. So we can go see it. You can bring the kids up so they can kind of get a sense of what Dad saw when he grew up, kind of thing. But we can also live down here and have a pretty good winter.
And there's some pretty cool places that are even within an hour's drive of Phoenix. You got Bartlett Lake, Swirl Lake. They're reservoirs, but there is a decent amount of water too, and places you can get wet. And it's a definitely unique spot
for sure. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the races too, and the differences. You've got, again, we're kind of just going back to the enduro versus the cross country. So all of ours, all the ones that I'm physically, hands-on with, are all cross country style races. So never put on an enduro. We've talked about, we know the popularity of that side of the sport. Considered, trying to get our feet wet with a race in that. what do you find, just on a kind of, again, personal level, doing it, putting these races together, working with the landowners, whether it's, BLM or Forest Service or whatnot, permitting, is it a lot different getting something? Because obviously when you're throwing all that downhill into a race, I can imagine there's probably a little bit more that you better think about the safety part of the race as well. Whereas cross country, there's going to be downhill, but you're not focusing on getting from point A to B at a fast clip. And it's certainly not, we're not talking like big downhill, like, so that's obviously a whole different monster to unpack. But again, just kind of going back, what do you find, or is there a difference in getting the permissions, getting the permitting done, and what kind of safety aspects go into an enduro versus a cross country?
I would say the biggest difference is other than being at a ski resort where you can, take a chairlift up or pedal up a service road and then come back down to the base and then go up and do another run, where you're pretty much coming up with some big loop that has a bunch of descents, and then you either need to loop back to the start or you're going to have to shuttle.
Right.
If, you're going down and then little up and then more down. So, like in Tucson, we did a race on Mount Lemmon, and we worked with Homegrown to coordinate shuttles to get people up to the top so they're not on the highway, which would be, we have done that in the past years ago, but that's just a much bigger headache as far as permitting and just rider safety. And even if there is a bike lane in the shoulder, it's like, not everyone's comfortable with that and having a car pass them. So, thinking in terms of that, whereas an XC race, you might say, Estrella Regional Park, we want to hold a race. Okay. Yeah. You can kind of pick and choose from your trails and just loop back to home. Right. So when you're doing more of like a point-to-point, which I know you guys know a lot about, or some type of event where you have to get people back to the start, safety definitely comes into play, and so then it's like, okay, well, if we can use some kind of shuttle system to bring people back, then that opens up opportunities for where you can do the race and end, because like at Mingus, they're working on a trail to go basically from the top of Mingus down into Cottonwood, like a giant, 4,000 foot descent. And so if you can kind of work with, okay, well, if we start at the top and then we end somewhere down in town, then, it opens up a lot of doors for different segments and trails to be used, and just a lot more fun for riders to have a big descent like that. So, and ironically, from a safety perspective, we have many fewer injuries in enduro than we do in XC, because everyone has pads, usually full face helmets. They're a lot more protected. Whereas XC, you go down, you're in Lycra, and it's like you just scrape up your whole leg, or we've had punctured lungs, we had broken hips, and all kinds of stuff like that. And there's not much protecting you when you're just in your bike shorts.
I imagine if you're getting into an enduro race, you know obviously that this is what's expected of me, and so you're going to have, not only that, there's going to be your built-in, I guess what you're trying to say, I'm trying to say is your built-in cautions, right? You know how fast you can go downhill. You've probably come out and pre-ridden the course, as most people do, so you've been down the hill a few times. All right, the turn here, the feature there. Whereas cross-country, again, you could still go out and pre-ride and whatnot, but it is going to be one that you're less protected on for the most part, because we're not all fully armored up. And if you go down, it's just as easy to go down. But if you're not wearing any of that stuff, then it's just you and the gravel at that point.
And Arizona has some fantastic riders. I mean, both XC and enduro, but definitely on the enduro side of things, it's really cool to see, especially some of these younger kids that have kind of grown up, that you see grow up through the race series because they're so young. There's a lot of talent here.
So I'd consider doing it just as a, pre-drop to something that may or may not ever happen. Certainly, for the future, I was just curious on that respect, to kind of as a personal, director to race director kind of thing, like what kind of maybe pushback you've gotten and stuff.
I'd say the biggest challenge overall is communication, because you've got these stages out in the woods, and some places have cell service, some don't. And trying to communicate between the finish crew and the start crew, even if you've got chips and antennas and stuff in the ground. You just kind of go. Still, if there's a rider down, you need to somehow communicate and then get people to that rider. So there are some cool places you could hold an enduro, but then it's like, oh, how will we even get someone out if they do crash? So there's lots to think about.
Do you ever get any kind of pushback from the landowners, whomever it might be, not understanding the particulars of an enduro versus just a cross-country race?
I just assume they have no idea what we're doing.
Okay.
I mean, hey, we're doing a mountain bike race. The down sections are timed, so it does allow us to use certain trails that we might not be able to just as a transfer. It's like, okay, we're going to be like at Hawes, we kind of have to go along the canal, and so we're not really racing on the canal, but they allow us to use it just because we just got to get from point A over to here. So that does kind of help.
Sure.
But I mean, sometimes you get a Forest Service manager who's a mountain biker or something, or into that kind of stuff, and they know. Otherwise, they're just like, oh, okay, show us your route, and looks good. There's no owls in that area. Go ahead.
It's always about the owls.
The sacred owls.
What is your favorite race to put on of yours? Do you have one?
McDowell Meltdown's fun because it's the first race of the year. And there's a lot of excitement around it. There's so many people. That's pretty fun. Being kind of the one, like the Enduro series was kind of my baby. And kind of we had a Super D against Flagstaff, which was kind of a long, mostly down, but had some pedaling in it race, one stage. But I think it was in 2015. It was like the Enduro stuff was kind of coming onto the scene. And so we tried it in Prescott, and it was like super well received. And people were like, oh, yeah, this is really fun. We don't really like having to pedal super hard. We just want to ride with our buddies and then go, race hard on the downs. So that's been fun to see it evolve and see new riders come out.
Cool. So speaking of that, Mingus and Prescott, tell us, because I'm familiar with some of the trails up there, but what trails, like what part of the mountain are you using? Are you heading back? Are you going back down into Prescott using trails that are kind of pointed in that direction?
Can't say. The way we do the enduros, most of the enduro races are kind of set up where it's a bit of a secret until the week of or a couple days before, just to kind of give the locals maybe don't know exactly. It's kind of even the playing field a little bit. So but at Mingus, so we'll say, okay, we're going to stage up at the top, and there's going to be 3 stages and roughly maybe 1,500 feet of climbing, and then overall it's maybe 12 or 15 miles. So that's the course. So when you sign up, kind of like that's the information you get. Okay, well, here's the staging area. So trails in this area, so you can obviously go out and ride and check it out. And then, or like at sunrise, you could just go up there, ride all the trails, and then when we basically, we release the course Thursday evening. If the race is going to be on Sunday. And then people can pre-ride Friday, Saturday, get it all marked, and then the race will be Sunday.
Very cool.
Whereas, and it kind of works out good too, because sometimes we run into some challenges with like the monsoons. We have to make some edits to the course, and then we don't have to go email everyone and say, well, actually we have to go over here right now. We can kind of be doing some of that behind the scenes, up until a couple weeks before. Usually it's finalized already, but occasionally it's like, oh man, that trail just is not going to be ready for a race, so we're going to make a little adjustment. So.
That it was just this past spring, not monsoon, but the snow in Flagstaff. Had to change up the cross country.
There was all the snow, and so one of the challenging things there. So we were supposed to be in Flag beginning of May, and it was the middle of April, and there was still like 4 feet of snow in parts of the course. And so you have to make the decision: do we move it or do we stay? And if we just went for it, it might work, or you might have to cancel it. If you So you kind of we needed to make the decision a little bit earlier than most people, I think, would have liked or would have realized.
Right.
Just because you got to get a new venue, new course permit,
Yep.
portos, all the stuff that goes into the race.
Right.
Kind of have to have that organized ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it did end up drying out where we probably could have held the race. Up top, it might have been a little wet.
Yeah.
But we're always kind of thinking like, okay, we want to preserve the trails first. So if we're going to go out and cause a bunch of damage, like we don't need to be holding the race there.
Right.
So, and then the other nice thing was for this one, we were able to kind of try a little bit different format. So because it was down and we moved it to McDowell.
Yep.
And so we tried this mass start thing.
Right.
Which was kind of neat. And we were able to use a different course, some different trails.
Right.
And so overall it was kind of fun, something different.
Yeah, good experience.
I don't think I would do that again with the mass start and whatnot. It was
Yeah.
it was okay. It's just not what people were used to
Sure.
for like a local series.
Yep.
But yeah, it allowed us to do something a little different, and it worked out, and we got to race. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the changes that you and myself and people in our position have to always constantly be looking for with that kind of stuff, environmental changes that happen, whether it's snow or monsoon or whatnot. I think it kind of comes down to like what you said was trail preservation, especially with you guys. I mean, your whole thing is about giving back to the trails. You're a whole nonprofit and what you guys do. I think too, like the rider racer safety. And then their experience. I take that back to the story you said about your friends coming out here in February and first race and his bike's covered in mud. I mean, sure, that could be kind of fun a little bit if there's you're out there and especially for us because we don't live in a wet state, right? So to have a little bit of like a wet course is kind of a little bit of a different. But if you're out there for a race, you really want to have like the whole thing, super wet or even half wet, that kind of thing. So you do have to think about those kind of things. Like, is this going to actually be fun for anybody to actually come out and race for all day Saturday?
My sister came out from Wisconsin one February,
Yep.
and it happened to be the weekend that it snowed down here in Phoenix.
Okay.
And, everyone here is all excited, and they're
Right.
like, what is this? We came out here to get away from the snow.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's definitely a lot that goes on behind the scenes that you wouldn't necessarily think about as a racer.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, someone will, email in or ask, why can't we do something here or do this? And then, as soon as you kind of like explain a little bit, they're like, oh yeah, I never really thought about that. Sure. So it's good to get people involved, and especially like people who volunteer. We have like a trail work requirement for our series overall riders. So if you're going to win the series, we ask that you give 5 hours back to just be on your home trails, raking, picking up trash or something, or one of our trail work days.
Sure.
Well, at least it gets you out in the community, being more involved than just showing up, race, and that's it.
Yep.
So.
Good segue. You mentioned the trail work days. So this is the kind of type of year that all of the different trail groups kind of start getting back out. The heat kind of has dropped down a little bit, but you still have races going on. Are you doing official trail work days between now and April?
We usually start with McDowell here like in December as we get into the new year, and then ahead of each race we'll do like a McDowell work day before the McDowell race, and then before Estrella and White Tanks and whatnot, and kind of coordinate with the local groups too. They'll know what our race course is, and we can kind of work together to help get volunteers, or if we need to bring the trailer out to get tools and things like that. And then obviously we try to clean up and leave the trails in good condition after the race too.
Right, of course.
Sometimes it makes sense to do the trail work day after the race. Just to kind of fix some, depending on if it was really dry, maybe some corners get blown out and we need to kind of, wait for a little bit of rain, and then we can kind of fix them a little bit. Or sometimes it's like, oh, you know what, we really need to make a berm there because every year it just gets washed out, or the fall line is just not sustainable. So maybe we need to look at rerouting. So some of those kind of things, and what West Valley has done in, between White Tanks and Estrella and all those trails over there, it's really cool to see, because some of that stuff, is just, this really isn't sustainable. And and they've done a nice job building a lot of new trails.
Yeah, Brian's done a lot of great work
Brian's
out there.
Great. Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Estrella is the first. It was the oldest of the Maricopa
Yeah,
parks.
I believe Estrella is the oldest.
So
yep.
I can imagine. I mean, and I've ridden out there, so I don't have to imagine that. Being as old as it was, I don't know. The trails probably weren't designed for the high speed traffic that they see out there now. So, like you were saying, things were not put into consideration for water lines or that kind of stuff at the time.
Well, and every year, you get like a little rock, and then more dirt kind of washes away, and next thing you know, it's like this giant boulder.
Right.
And if you go out to like McDowell's,
Yep.
Tom's Thumb, Bell Pass, Wingate Pass. I mean, they all started like Brown's Ranch,
right?
To a degree.
Yeah.
This side of the McDowell or the Scottsdale side is more rocky than the Fountain Hill side. But the trails did start fairly smooth.
Yeah.
And after 12, 15 years, they start to get a little rougher. And so Estrella, every year, someone will say, "Oh yeah, this is the worst year." Estrella's been in the worst condition, like when they go out and pre-ride.
Yeah.
And then we go out there and we're like,
it's just
pretty
Estrella.
just the same, yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah, but back to Brian. I mean, he's been doing such good work there, and white tanks and the trails in between stuff. It's just amazing to see the transformation that a day.
Yeah,
a day
and
goes.
we could not really function and hold these races without groups like West Valley, people like Brian, because I'm one person. Yeah, we can get some volunteers to do trail work, but I can only be in so many places, and when you're putting on 10, 12 races a year, there's just so many moving parts. You can only do so much. And then trying to ride and have a kid and other stuff.
Right.
It all takes time.
Yep, for sure. So outside of racers, I assume they get some sort of info when they sign up about the trail work day and signing up and the hours that you'd like them to volunteer. I don't recall seeing it. Is there stuff on the website about where you can find trail work information?
Yeah, we'll have a volunteer tab up there,
and
probably in the next month or so, we'll get those dates scheduled.
Cool.
And then they can see, or on Facebook, we'll put it out there.
Sure.
And then people can say, oh, okay, on Saturday they're doing trail work at White Tanks.
Right.
And it usually will say, okay, this is the section we're going to work on, and we're either going to drive you out or it's short enough to hike to, and we'll work from 8 to noon and then have lunch and then you go about your day.
Very cool.
But yeah, awesome. I mean, those work days really make a huge difference. And we've had lots of kids or teams or different groups come out.
Yep.
And it's fun too. I really like doing more trail maintenance work. I don't do a lot of like fresh building and digging and running the machines and stuff.
Right.
I mean, that's fun, but it's fun to really get a trail cleaned up and re-rideable and kind of fix certain things that need to be to make them more sustainable for the next year and the next year.
Yep. Awesome. You do good work. Facebook, when that comes out, when you post the events, website for any of you who are looking to join up and do some trail work, whether you're racing or not, it's a great way to volunteer and get out for a day, meet some people if you're not a mountain biker or you're not a racer, meet some new people. But whether you use the trails for any kind of equestrian or hiking, running, whatever, great way to give back for sure. And again, meeting new people who are dedicated to the same kind of things that you guys do. So you've got asked about your racing, but do you have any races on the calendar coming up? Anything that you're getting ready for yourself?
For me, I'd like to do C4, the Cave Creek race. That's a super fun race. It's it's short enough where you're not just completely spent after it, and then they have great fun after atmosphere, after party kind of deal. So that's a really fun, and the guys up there, guys and gals, who are kind of head of the organization up there, do a great job, and they've the trails are super fun. So.
Kalen's been talking a lot about it online. I keep seeing things, and he's done at least one pre-ride, if not two, and has a couple more coming up too. So it's definitely a one to check out. What else do you have coming up for yourself? What are you looking forward to with either the end of the Enduro or the start of the spring? Any surprises that you can hint to or drop now, or changes or fun things happening?
We'd like to add some more cross-country venues.
Okay.
So we're kind of scoping a few new places out, and maybe go back to some other areas that are a little farther away.
Okay.
I mean, further for certain people if you live in Phoenix, but
Sure.
yeah, I mean, Tucson, we've kind of struggled to get a cross-country race down there.
Yep.
And there's some potential areas, but also some hurdles.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if anyone has ideas or has a trail system near them, or even like a private land that we can use for parking, we've worked with people like that before.
Sure. Yeah. Adjacent
to make an event happen.
Yep.
So, the riders' feedback is the best thing for the MBAA.
Yep.
I can only see things from my perspective, and that's one of the great things about our board. We've got just a diverse group of people who are seeing things from a ladies race perspective, a recreational rider perspective, a parent perspective, and these different things, so that we can kind of get most of the bases covered.
Yeah.
And so getting feedback from people, maybe we change something, they say, I really don't like that, or hey, I'm 45, I don't want to be racing with these 20-year-olds, can we have a 45 plus category? And it's like, okay, well, I wouldn't have thought about that. So for someone to email or just talk to me at a race, that's over the last 10 years, that's really helped kind of shape the MBAA. And same with the enduro. It was like, oh yeah, we should have an enduro race. Okay, let's try it. And good feedback. Okay, let's add an enduro series.
Nice. So I don't want to push it if you don't want to say it. You kind of deflected off, but just to say, just to kind of ask again, anything that's different or new that's coming up. So you kind of mentioned like new venues. Would you add a whole new race, like make it a 7-race series, or
I'd be open to that.
Definitely.
Yeah. We don't do a lot in kind of between the beginning of February and the middle of March.
Okay.
There's you got Old Pueblo, you got Cactus Cup, so there's like other events.
Sure.
We don't have an MBAA race in there. So there's definitely an opportunity to do another maybe not a flag or a Prescott race, because you're going to have probably snow or wet up there, or colder.
Sure.
But we could definitely get another event somewhere in Phoenix or Tucson.
Gotcha.
Or further south, Sierra Vista. We used to race at Fort Huachuca on the base. That's there's potential there. So
nice.
There's definitely options, and it'd be nice to mix things up a little bit. And kind of we go from January. We kind of have almost like 2 seasons, where you've got the 3 valley races, McDowell, Estrella, White Tanks, spaced by 2 weeks, which is kind of nice because it's a concentrated 6-week block. And then we have this little break in our series, but then a lot of people go and do 24 hours and just other events.
Sure.
And then we have 1 race in April, May, and March, April, and May. So
very cool. The Havasu race, being the furthest for us, we kind of mentioned, like they're not far for everyone, right? Depends on the community you live. Do you find that one brings in the most from the surrounding states? Obviously, Havasu closer to California, it's closer to Nevada. Probably I guess Utah. I mean, anything that's north is going to be a little bit closer to the others. So do you find more out of state racers checking you guys out for that one versus coming all the way?
We
down?
have got more California people to the Havasu race. It kind of a big dependent is if there's like a Pro XCT or another bigger race, which the USAC, the kind of Pro XCT series has really lost a lot of momentum.
Okay.
There's a lot more gravel racing and the longer races now in the Lifetime series. But the years where it would be like in March and April, California Pro XCT, then we get to piggyback of people coming out here, train, do some tune-up races, and then go to those races. So you'd have 25, 30 pro or junior pro riders in some of these fields, which is pretty cool because the more talent you have together, it really accelerates everybody's development. So but Havasu, I mean, that's probably one of the best venues because it's at the rodeo grounds. There's showers. They got Mud Sharks got their beer bar set up right there. The trails are pretty fun. So every race has kind of a unique characteristic, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Even you go from McDowell to White Tanks to Estrella. I mean, they're very different parks.
Yep.
And obviously in Prescott's different and Flag is different.
For sure.
So,
for sure. And if I remember correctly, I think Havasu, at least one of them gets down kind of close to the water. It's not like on the water. But,
yeah,
I mean,
a little bit.
So you get like, again, something that none of the other races have.
Yeah.
Water view. You got a waterfront view. You've got a big lake in front of you. And I think Havasu definitely qualifies as getting folks into a different community to see like, what parts of Arizona, because it's obviously very different up there than it is even down here or Flagstaff.
And we get a lot of people who race Havasu just because they live in town who don't do the other races.
They're not going to come this way.
Yeah, it's a different crowd.
Yep.
It's fun.
Very cool. Anything else big on the horizon for you or MBAA?
Nothing earth-shattering.
No. Okay.
There's definitely some potential cool venues in the works, or just that we'd like to pursue more. Which should be fun, and it's been nice to be kind of at the size we are, to where we have enough revenue coming in that we can still give back a lot, but we could also try a new, like the state championship race. That's a pretty small race. We're not really bringing in much money from it, if any money.
Right.
But it's super fun for those riders.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great race course.
Yep.
So it gives them, and there's some other benefits with USAC points and things like that, and being the state champion. So, we can kind of do some of that where it's like, okay, well, that's just kind of its own thing, and it's really fun for the people that want to come.
Yeah.
And we can mix up the course every year, so there's lots of fun things about that race.
Yeah, if you're dedicating a series to being a series, it's nice to have that closure. You don't want to just end race number 4, race number 5, and like, okay, great, you guys did all good, or whatnot. But having that, all right, let's come back together and duke it out for the final. Was definitely a pretty cool thing for the racers themselves.
Yeah.
Where can I was going to say, is there anything that we didn't touch on for MBAA that if someone's out there listening and watching this that isn't familiar with us, isn't familiar with you, that you want to know? What didn't we?
We definitely have enough categories for anyone, from the beginner to I used to race back in the 90s or whatnot.
Yep.
Mom, dad, junior.
Yeah.
So that even like 6 and under, we do like a little free, Strider pedal bike race. So there's lots of fun opportunities to come out and ride in a little more competitive atmosphere.
Very cool. Yeah, I love the fact that you have that beginner option. One race only or first race only, right? Is that how you got to set it up? $20 or $25, like just come out, get your feet wet, try a race, right? Get out and race, and maybe you don't like it, maybe you do. You haven't put too much into it, where you feel like, oh, I just spent $120 and I really did not have a good time. It's not my thing. Or I love this. I don't mind spending $120 next time to go do it again and join up for the series or join up for
big, we want to keep the entry fees and the costs reasonable.
Sure.
Because if you got mom and dad and little Johnny and Susie, and it's 4 entries.
Yeah.
There's plenty of big one-off races that you can go do.
Yeah.
And we want to keep it, tailored to, the local. Want to come out and race on the weekend kind of thing. And if you're training for something that's great, you can build up throughout the series and be competitive. But enough to be able to give back to the trails, but also not so expensive that we don't do huge swag bags, and not everyone's not getting sweatshirts and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But that allows us to give more to the trails, and I think people understand that, and it's just kind of like this nice circle of, oh, you paid your race entry fee, and then we get sponsored dollars, and you buy some shirts, and then we can give that money back to the trails, and then you can go out and ride those trails, and then you race. So it's like this nice cycle of give back and everybody wins.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell everyone how they can find you online, socials. What are the
MBAA, so Mountain Bike Association of Arizona, MBAA.net is our website.
Okay.
And then we've got Facebook and Instagram, MBAA Race Series.
Race Series,
yep.
Okay.
Instagram's fun especially now for the Enduro Series, because a lot of people have GoPros, and we can share a lot of that footage, and there's some really fun videos and photos from that. Yeah. And then around the races, we share photos and things. But Facebook is probably the place where we're active, where we have all the events and things, and on the website.
Very cool. Yeah, I think some of the user submitted, racer submitted pictures and photos. You can get a photographer out there, and not bashing photographers, because they send us some good stuff at the end of the day too. That we can then push out, from both of our perspectives. Push out to the racers as a little memento for their experience. But sometimes that in race picture or video that you wouldn't have been able to capture unless you had your photographer at that spot at that moment, and they share it on Instagram. They tag us or whatnot, tag you, and it's like, holy cow, like boom, and of course they make it easy for us to just then blow it out to everybody else too if we want to. But yeah, it's pretty. That's another cool aspect of the races for sure, is to be able to kind of like, hey, you guys might have missed this, but on the marathon course, during lap number 1, this all happened, and like something that, again, if you weren't there at the moment, there's no other way to capture it. So that's
probably the best part of the whole shebang, is talking to riders after their race, and just hearing about their individual race story, or their battle with there might have been 50 people in their category, but they were duking it out with this small group of riders, or so and so came unclipped on the descent and rode it out, and this and that, and everyone's really excited, and they got their endorphin dopamine rush, and that's the best part of the whole thing for sure.
Talking to everyone and about the experience.
Very
cool. Well, Tim, thank you for coming out.
Glad to be here. This was
awesome
fun
conversation. I'll have to have you out again sometime. Maybe when you've got one of those new venues that you're ready to drop on everybody, we could do a reveal party or something like that for you. So once again, it was mbaa.net, not .com.
That's the website.
And then Facebook and Instagram. Kind of the local place, the place that everybody goes. So if you just remember MBAA, I'm sure it'll come up. Even if you just search MBAA, it'll come up. So go out, check them out. If you're from afar and don't know anything about them, they've got a really intensive website, lots of stuff on there, lots of information, and sign up for a race. So again, thanks for coming out. We'll do it again sometime. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the podcast. We'll see you all next time.
Sounds
Bye.
Great.